Good evening. I'm Richa, and I'm speaking from India. I believe we have an audience which is global, so there are different time zones, and people are logging in from their respective places. So, hello. Today, we're talking about understanding the rainbow. And as you can see on your screen, right on your screen, it says love is love. So, as is indicative, we're going to understand something about the LGBTQ community. Um, all right, great. So, as you all know, that June is Global Pride Month. So, what is Pride? Pride is a march of celebration. It is also a march of protest because world over, people from the LGBTQ community don't have and don't enjoy the equal rights that you and I do. Right? So we'll understand more about the community and why it's important to know about the community. So, can we get the next slide, please? Next, please. All right, so quickly trying to tell you what we're going to do today. A little bit about us. I represent the Keshav Suri Foundation. We'll get to know, like I said, about the LGBTQI community. What is sex? What is gender? What is sexual orientation? What is gender identity? And what is D&I? What do these words stand for? Diversity and inclusion. What is the difference between equality and equity? So we'll get to know a little bit about that. Next slide, please. Okay, I love this quote and I'd like you to please read it and let it sink in. It says, "It is terrible to have to choose between being safe and being yourself. No child or adult should ever have to make that choice." I think it's such a powerful statement, something that we don't even think about. People from the regular heterosexual community live our lives without thinking about this. And this is a concern that the LGBTQ community faces on a daily basis, especially if whether they're in the closet or they're not. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so a little bit about the Keshav Suri Foundation. As I told you before, we are a foundation that got launched in 2018, and we are based out of India, in Delhi. And our motto is to embrace, empower, and mainstream the LGBTQ community in India. Having said that, we've also participated in many, many international forums, and we're glad to be to be collaborating with GMI today. And thank you for having us again. Next slide, please. All right. So the Keshav Suri Foundation also runs the It Gets Better project. To tell you a little bit about the project, this started in the United States of America with a simple YouTube video where, and the ultimate objective of the video was to stop teenage suicides. Teenage suicides were rising in the US mainly because LGBTQ children, youth, felt discriminated, bullied, and harassed, and they thought dying was easier than living. And hence, this video was launched and it suddenly went viral. And today, It Gets Better project runs all over the world. And the Keshav Suri Foundation have brought that project to India. Apart from It Gets Better, our mission and objectives is to provide employable skills, to sensitize workspaces in accepting diversity, and to work towards gender neutral policies. Next, please. All right. So, like I said earlier, let's understand what's diversity and what is inclusion. So, as we can understand from very, very simple English meanings, diversity is the fact or quality of being diverse, difference. I know that this is a global network and there are people from all countries, color, race, gender, ethnicity, religion, belief, values. So all of us as human beings are inherently diverse. And then what is inclusion? Inclusion is the act of including, the state of being included, right? Next slide, please. Okay, I love this photograph because this is the true colors of the community. You know, this is a photograph which is showing that people from different communities uh, are living their authentic self. This is how they would like to express themselves without feeling fear of being made fun of, right? Okay, next slide, please. Okay. So I'm just going to throw these words at you because this is a variety of, terms you may have heard, but may not really know the meaning of. So we just discussed diversity and inclusion, but there's also this box here which says equity. Now, what is equity in policy, practice, and position? Now, to explain this more better, I'd like you to refer to this picture on the bottom right of the slide, which shows the difference between equality and equity, where we see that, if all three people are given equal boxes to stand and watch, let's say, a football match over here, they're still not able to see it, right? But if we provide them the correct resources, that is equity, right? So you provide two boxes to the little girl so she can raise and rise and see. And similarly, a ramp for the fellow in the wheelchair so that they can also see the match. So that is the difference between equality and equity. On the bottom left of the slide, you can see three boxes which talk about diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And this is another picture that I really like. So diversity says is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance, and belonging is dancing like no one's watching, right? So it's what you feel with family, for example, or with close friends, where you don't feel conscious, you don't feel that you don't belong to that group. So ultimately, organizations, schools, institutions, colleges, that is the kind of feeling they want to drive amongst their people, right? Moving on to the next slide, please. Okay. So this is a small box to say that why is D&I important? Well, of course, if you see through the different boxes, and I can tell you very quickly, one is higher innovation. When you have different minds thinking about solutions to one problem, solutions are faster, right? And you will sometimes be amazed that you are suddenly faced with a solution from a group member of something that you didn't even think about just because they think differently. And people from the LGBTQ community also have generally, it's seen that they have a very creative bent of mind, are artistic in nature, and hence, especially in your field, I'm sure you will find many people from the community. So hence, it's even more important that we get to know more about them. Moving on. All right. So let's understand what's the difference between sex, gender, and sexual orientation. So sex is biological. It's differentiated on the basis of reproductive organs. So there is male, there is female, and there's also something called intersex, right? Then there's gender, which describes the psychological and social meaning added to being a man or a woman. What does it mean to be a man? Which means what does the society expect out of being a man, or what do men will mostly tend to think like, or women? And then the third thing is sexual orientation, which is an enduring pattern of romantic or sexual attraction or a combination of these to people, right? So basically, who are you romantically attracted to? The next slide, please. Now, this is actually an artwork that was developed to educate children, right? And it's called the Gender Unicorn, where you can see that on the top, there is a rainbow, which is basically coming from the mind. So this is talking about gender identity. Gender identity is in our mind. How do I think? Like a female woman or a girl, like a male man or a boy, or other gender. Then there's gender expression. How do I express myself? Am I feminine, masculine, or other? Then, if you see where the genital organs are supposed to be, that's the sex assigned at birth. So, when you're a baby, the doctor is able to say whether you're a female, a male, or intersex, right? And then, where the heart is, you see two hearts, one, an orange color heart, which says physically attracted to a woman, man, or other, and then emotionally attracted to women, men, or other. Of course, this is very basic, and you can go into many, many further nuances of that. But since we're just scratching the surface, so let's understand this. Moving on, please. Okay. So, gender roles, right? This is what we've grown up seeing. Right from the time that we are born, we typically see that, if it's a baby girl, her dresses would be in pink. If it's a baby boy, their dresses would be in blue. You'll get a doll for a girl, and you'll get a car or some fighting action hero for a boy. And from there on, the conditioning starts. And hence, it's very difficult for a child who does not identify to their assigned gender. They're constantly fighting an inner battle. And hence, it's very, very important for the rest of the people around them to be understanding that it's not always that girls would like pink and that boys would like blue, right? Moving on, please. Okay, so let's understand about sexual orientation. Now, broadly speaking, there are four kinds of sexual orientation: asexual, bisexual, heterosexual, and homosexual. Well, asexual is generally characterized by not feeling a sexual attraction towards any gender, right? And this is different from celibacy. Celibacy is the deliberate abstention from sexual activity, right? Bisexual is a person who's attracted to both genders, men and women. Heterosexual is generally a person attracted to the opposite sex, right? And homosexual is a person who's attracted to the same sex, right? So, very broadly speaking, these are the four. And of course, I'm going to repeat myself. There could be many, many more categories, but I'm not going to get into that. Next slide, please. All right. So let's understand what these letters mean. LGBTQIA, right? So L is lesbian, what we just understood, an offshoot of being homosexual. Lesbian women are also called gay, and there's nothing wrong with that. A lesbian is a woman who is sexually attracted to another woman. Similarly, a gay is a male who's sexually attracted to another male. A bisexual, that like we discussed before, and transgender. I'm sure there are maximum amount of questions for transgender, so I'm going to spend some time explaining that. Transgender is when a person's gender identity is different than what society expects them, based on their sex assigned at birth, right? So a trans gender could have further categories of being a trans woman or a trans man. Now, an easy way to learn this, and that's how I learned because I was getting confused too. So, a trans woman is a man who was transitioning to be a woman, right? Similarly, a trans man is a woman who's transitioning to be a man. Now, trans women and trans men could be at various points of their transition process. They could, and when I say transition process, it means hormone therapy and maybe finally a surgery. Now, there are various milestones into that whole transition process. And there are many people from the transgender community who may not transition surgically or even by taking hormones. They just identify themselves as, let's say, women or men, and that's the way they want to conduct their life. They might still look like a man in the case of a trans woman. And hence, there can be a dissonance in your mind that, oh, he looks like a man, but he says he's a woman. We have to respect at all times the sexual identity, the gender identity that person declares themselves to be. Okay? The next word, alphabet is queer. Queer is an umbrella term that does not conform to a particular bucket. So basically, we're saying that LGBTQIA all come under the umbrella of being queer. So queer is basically anybody who's different. Q also stands for questioning. And questioning folks are those who are still deciding which bucket they're in. Because, like I said earlier, gender is a spectrum, sexual orientation is a spectrum. You know, you might grow up to be straight, but you might develop feelings for the same sex. So it is a journey, it is a spectrum, it is a band, right? Then there's intersex, where the sexual anatomy is not typically male or female. So here, right from the moment of birth, the medical professionals will be able to tell that neither the male or the female genitals are completely developed, and hence this is a medical condition which is termed intersex, and they grow up to either live their lives as queer individuals, or they decide that they're going to live their lives as a female or a male. Okay, moving on. The next slide, please. Okay. So these are the problems faced by LGBT youth, and LGBT youth is present all around the world. We can't say that they're only in the United States of America or in Europe or only in Western countries. Trust me, that's the notion that most Indians have, that this is a Western concept. Well, LGBT history is very rich in my country. And unfortunately, for the years of being colonized, we kind of forgot our culture and heritage. So 18% of LGBT youth fear of being out or open. 51% LGBT youth are more likely to be discriminated or harassed. And 26% have said that they have non-accepting families. And these are global figures that we're talking about. Of course, the figures in my country would be much, much worse. Moving on, please. Okay, so here you see workplace challenges faced by the LGBT workers. Now, this could, when I say workplace, it could also be any organization, right? So when it comes to your organization, LGBT workers might feel this way, LGBT colleagues might feel this way, that they are under the pressure of conforming to the norm, that this is the way a boy is supposed to behave, this is the way a girl is supposed to behave, and they have to conform to the norm. They are often, if you can see, more than 50% face direct or indirect discrimination. And about 25% say that there is a lack of role models, which means that they don't see a public out figure to say, to show them that, you know, they're living their authentic lives, they're living their lives as an out LGBT person, and hence they don't have anybody to look up to. So a majority of LGBT people spend their lives being in the closet. Next, please. Okay, so since we have a paucity of time, I'm going to share, of course, this presentation is going to be posted to all of you, and you can refer to it at your own time, because you know, it's always good to have reference material. And here is a YouTube link which you can watch later, which talks about the history of LGBT people and how the whole movement started. How did it all start? Next slide, please. All right. So, you know, we've all said that we're all inherently diverse. We're all different from each other. Then why is it that inclusion becomes a problem? Why is it that we need to specifically talk about inclusion today? Well, naturally, we are tuned to think, and I'm not saying that that's true for everyone, but it's generally seen that people have assumptions of superiority, that I'm better than you. right? So that's a roadblock in inclusion. Sometimes there's an assumption of correctness, that this is the way it should be. This is the way a man should behave. This is the way a woman should behave, right? And assumption of universality, which means we're all the same. It doesn't matter what color you are, which country you come from, we're all the same. And everybody's just like me. Well, that's not true. People are different, and that's what makes the world a beautiful place. Next, please. Okay, so this is really the next couple of slides. The next three slides are the most important slides, actually. And if you want to take out your notepad and pencil, you're most welcome to do that. These are good notes. And this is something that you should be aware of and mindful of, especially if you're organizing projects, teams, camps, etc. Okay, so what should you do? Ask the individual. If you feel that somebody is from the community, ask the individual what would be their preferred name and salutation. Now, the easy thing to do is introduce yourself. Then you can say that, hi, my name is Richa, and my preferred pronouns are she, her, and hers. What are your preferred pronouns? So that's an easy segue of getting into this conversation, right? So once you've had that, refer to the individual using the same, even if this is different from what is mentioned in their documents. Sometimes the community faces a lot of problems, especially the trans community, because their birth name or the name in their documents might be different from what their chosen name is, right? Okay, moving on to the next slide, please. Okay, show washroom facilities as they exist. Now, if you have the ability to have 3 separate washrooms, then that's great. If you don't, have one which is unisex, but your signage should be inclusive, and which would mean that something that I have put there, a small picture, and you can see, and you can find many better examples on the net. So small things like this make a huge difference. You might think it doesn't matter. I know of people where they go to regular offices, and when they don't have unisex washrooms or washrooms just meant for the trans community, they have spent an entire day at work without going to the loo. And imagine how hard that must be for that person. So this is a very, very critical thing to have. The next point, which is again very important, is unless an individual mentions it to you, do not ask their LGBTQ status. It's rude. And when the person is comfortable, they themselves will tell you. So it's better not to be intrusive. Respect everyone as individuals for what they are. Okay. All right. Can we have the next slide, please? Yes. Do not stare, smile slyly, make fun of, point out, or ask inappropriate questions to any individual of the LGBTQ community. Now, remember your time in high school, right? I'm sure you faced a point in time at that time where you felt that somebody was making fun of you. And if you can remember that time, I'm sure you felt horrible. So that's not something that we want to make another individual feel like. The next is body language and tone of voice should be neutral and friendly always. Now, I know that there are homophobic people around the world, right? And secretly, somebody who professes to be an ally could be homophobic. But when you're at your workplace, or when you're part of an organization that professes itself to be inclusive, you will have to leave your personal feelings outside of that organization, right? And here I'm assuming that GMI is making that promise that they are an inclusive organization, and hence it will be very, very critical to understand that as an individual, if I have homophobic feelings and thoughts and ideas, I'll have to leave them outside of work. The last point here is, yes, okay. The next slide, when greeting others. So naturally for us, it comes to say that girls and boys, right? Or ladies and gentlemen. Instead, it's good to say generic terms like thanks friends, have a great night, or good morning folks, hi everyone, can I get you all something. Now these are generic terms, they don't specifically uh, are towards a particular gender, and hence this is gender inclusive language. So it's just easy, and it's also very inclusive, right? It just suddenly is including everyone in the room as part of that conversation. Next, please. Right. So this is a small table, again, a very, very important table for everybody to know. And this is on pronouns. Like I said earlier, women, cisgendered females would say she, her, hers, herself. Cisgender men would say he, him, his, himself. And there is a third pronoun which is they, them, theirs. Now I know we've all grown up learning in school that they, them, theirs is meant for plural, but the trans community specifically, or the queer, the umbrella community, has said that we don't want to identify to a he or a she. I want to be neutral, and hence my pronouns are they, them, theirs. And when somebody says that, then that is how we have to address them. So for example, you could say this is her piano, and instead of her, you could say, this is their piano. And here, there does not mean two people. There, it means that one person. You see here at the end, there is another row which says Z. Now, that's another pronoun that's been added because the LGBTQ community, like I said, is extremely creative. So Z, zer, zers. And if you see that somewhere, don't get confused. This is another gender neutral pronoun. Okay. Moving on to the next slide. Okay. So, like I told you, we also handle the It Gets Better project, and It Gets Better got a lot of support from celebrities around the world. And these are messages of support from Barack Obama, from Ellen DeGeneres. And in fact, I would urge you all to look up if you have a local chapter of It Gets Better. And there you'll find lots and lots of videos which are of queer people who've talked about their journey. And trust me, for a person who is growing up, especially youth, who's growing up not understanding what's wrong with them, if they see these videos, they feel and they are reassured that they're not alone. So it's a huge, huge message of support. And again, these links are going to be with you. You can see them at a later time. Moving on. All right, so these are the next steps. If you decide to embark on this journey, I think it's important to establish a sense of urgency. It's, the objective of having this session today is to bring about some sort of change, right? And I certainly don't want it to be, oh, we had a session and we forgot about it the moment it ended. So I would like, and that's my request to the organization, that there definitely has to be a sense of urgency. And how you can do that is by creating a guiding coalition, which means you create a team which works on what are the next steps in making and professing yourself to be an inclusive organization. So develop a vision and strategy and effectively communicate the change vision, because I understand that you're a global organization. So it's not just the head office that's speaking the language. Each and every one of you have to agree to be inclusive. Next, please. All right. So with that, we come to the end of the session. I'm afraid this is a one-way straight for me, and I'm not able to see any comments or questions. So if somebody from the support team can kind of let me know if there are any questions that you'd like me to take, I'm very happy to do that. Otherwise, that's my email address, rs@keshavsuri.foundation, and that's a colleague of mine, at keshavsuri.foundation. And that's it from my side. Thank you so much. Thank you.